Hi everyone, Jaelin here, registered dietitian. Thank you so much for tuning in because today I am super excited to show you how to make sourdough bread. Now I decided to make this because my sourdough starter recipe on Instagram at Nutrition Artist was super popular. So I've been making some sourdough bread here in my kitchen and I want to show you how I do it. Full disclosure, I am not a professional baker. I am not a professional bread maker in any way. This is something that I just started doing in my own kitchen for fun to pass the time during this quarantine period. Now I do cheat a little bit and I am using a stand mixer, which normally you would actually use your hands to do it. But this is kind of a quick and a little easier way to make your own bread without all the steps. And I figured I'd show you how I do it and hopefully you find this helpful. Before I get into it, please be sure to subscribe to my channel and remember to like this video. Leave me a comment if you have a question. So I'm starting with the sourdough starter and I just removed it from the fridge. Now it was fed overnight and as you can see there's two colored parts. So there's a lighter part and there's a darker part. That actually shows the amount of growth that happened last night. So this is a great sourdough starter. And normally what you would do is probably do a float test if you're not sure if it's ready, is you take a small amount of it with a spoon, you drop it into room temperature water, and if it floats, that means the starter is ready to use. If it sinks, it means you either need to let the starter sit longer to develop more bubbles or feed it again and let it sit and then do the float test again about 6 to 12 hours later. So this is how it looks like. As you can see, it's got a ton of little bubbles, which is great. This means this is a very good, healthy sourdough starter and it is ready to go. So now, if you notice too, it's got kind of like a fluffier texture and you'll see more when I stir it with a knife. But what I want to do is I want to give it a good mix. So I'm going to grab a knife, just like a regular butter knife, and then I'm going to stir it vigorously. Now, notice the texture here. The texture is kind of like, melted marshmallows, kind of like marshmallows when you make Rice Krispie squares. This is a perfect consistency that we are looking for. Now, this is the same sourdough starter that I discussed on CHCH Morning Live on live television. It's also on my Instagram at Nutrition Artist. If you want to check it out, you can find the recipe there. The link is down in bio. So here are the different flours right now. These are the flours we are going to use to make our sourdough bread. Now, it's time to create the base of the dough, and I'm going to do something called Autolyse. Autolyse is when you hydrate the flour so that it can open up and create gluten. Now, this is done because mixing dry flour does not create gluten, and so you need water. Now, I've got whole wheat flour, I have white flour, and I have water. So there is 3 cups of whole wheat flour, 1 cup of white flour, and 3 cups of water. And so these are the ratios I have for now, and they might change, but this is what I'm going to start with. Now I'm going to grab my mixing bowl. This is for my stand mixer, and it's for my KitchenAid stand mixer, not sponsored, but remember we're doing it in a stand mixer. Stir it up until everything is nicely incorporated. You can actually, when you're doing this, once you get a little better at it, play around with the hydration levels, less water, more water. I would read up a little bit on hydration levels. Maybe only I do that because I'm a little bit of a food science nerd, but we just want to make sure everything is well incorporated. So, and you want to see as little dry flour as possible. As you can see, it's not exactly the prettiest thing ever, but we're just trying to make sure that all of the flour gets wet in it. And I'm tilting it so you can see it better. So if you have a look right now, you can see that the water and the flour mixture has been well incorporated. So then what I'm going to do now is add my sourdough starter. Now I'm using a half a cup right there, and I'm going to scoop it out. It's not going to be clean, so just do the best you can. Scoop it out really carefully and then dump it into the dough mixture right there. I'm spreading it around. I'm going to get rid of some of the excess just to make sure most of it gets into the bowl. Remember, we don't want to get yeast on other surfaces because it is a form of yeast and it is like a bacteria. So we want to try to make sure we're not getting it all over the countertops and stuff. And then I'm going to take my wooden spoon and then I'm going to stir it around to incorporate it until it's well mixed and incorporated. So you can't even really tell that I added in the sourdough starter, but I know it's there. And if you can smell it, you can actually smell too that it has a bit more of a sour smell now. And then dust off my spoon, set it aside. And then I'm going to take my plastic wrap, cover the top, and I'm going to let it sit for an hour to let it autolyse. I'm letting it sit for an hour at room temperature. So an hour later, we are now going to remove the plastic wrap off of our dough, and I'm going to show you what it looks like. It's all very hydrated now. The autolysing process has worked. And now I'm going to add 2.5 teaspoons of salt. Now, the reason why we add the salt after is because salt actually messes with the autolysing process. So we add the salt right before we put it in with the stand mixer. And it's ready to go. As you can see, this is where we're going to start the mixing process, aka the kneading process that you would do if you're doing it on the floured surface and if you're doing it by hand. But as you can see, our salt is in there, and that right there I'm using is the dough hook. That's the one we want to use in order to mix up our dough. Now, what the dough hook is going to do, once I just lift the crank so that it goes into the dough, is it's going to start some gluten action, right? And usually get that by kneading it. That's usually what forms it. So there goes the dough hook. I started at number 2, and I'm going to slowly move up to number 4. You never want to go up to a higher number right away on a stand mixer. You want to move up slowly. And we're going to let this go for about 4 minutes. Now, we want some gluten action, but not too much gluten action because we want those nice big holes that you usually get in sourdough bread. If you find your dough is too thick, you can add more water, and the opposite is the same. So if you find your dough is too thin, you can add more flour to thicken it up. So time has passed, and as you can tell, you can see that the dough kind of has a stringiness to it. Can you tell? So this is what we are actually looking for, whether or not you are kneading it by hand or you're kneading it with a stand mixer like I am. Okay, so 4 minutes is done now, and that's what the mixture looks like. So now I'm going to transfer it to the largest mixing bowl I have. I'm going to spray it with some oil spray right there, and I want to get it all around the sides to make sure that my dough doesn't stick to the bowl because we don't want that when we're trying to take it out. And then what I'm going to do is transfer the dough into the metal bowl. Just pour it in, and then I'm just going to scrape it in so that it all goes into the bowl. So now it's all nicely in the bowl, in the nice oiled bowl, and then I'm going to take my plastic wrap and I'm going to cover it pretty firmly like so. And I am going to let it sit at room temperature for about 30 minutes. Now, sourdough starter is a form of yeast, which is a form of mold, which is why it's very important that you don't pour it down the drain because you don't want mold growth in your drain, and that when you dispose of it, let's say you put it in your green bin, you want to make sure you dispose of it properly, not getting on the sides, and make sure you get it in the garbage. The other thing you want to make sure you do is that you wash all the surfaces that the sourdough starter has touched. So your counter surfaces, your dishes, whatnot, you want to make sure that you actually wash those really well because you don't want any yeast or mold growth on there too. Be sure to also wash your hands really well because again, remember you're working with yeast and mold and you don't want to transfer that bacteria onto other surfaces. So this is now 30 minutes later. Every half an hour, you're going to remove your saran wrap. And then what you're going to do is do a sort of folding technique. I'll show you how I do it. What you do is you fold it like this. It's like you're bringing the bottom to the top, like that, all around. And this is something you're going to do every half an hour, so set the timer. And you're going to do this until it's done. Go all the way around, and that's it. And then you're going to wipe your hands well, wash them well, cover it back up with saran wrap, and then do it again in 30 minutes. Every 30 minutes, I am turning the dough. And what that's doing is giving it a better shape. So right now, my dough looks a little bit flat. So every 30 minutes, I'm gonna turn it around, and I'm gonna do that about 6 times. Now after every half an hour I've done that and I've done it 6 times, I'm gonna switch to doing it every hour now. And essentially I'm trying to get a nicer dome shape to my sourdough bread. I wanna get that nice consistency and I don't want it to be too flat because I don't want it to turn out like a cake. I want it nice and dense like a loaf of bread. So this is now the sourdough that's almost ready. As you can tell, it's got some bubbles in it. As you can tell, it's got some great volume. You put your finger in it, it's got a nice kind of sticky texture. You see how it kind of holds its shape? It's not too runny. That's what we're looking for. So next thing we're going to do is it's going to be transferred to another bowl here, a smaller bowl. And this is not the time to skimp on flour. You're going to add a lot of flour to it right there. And then it's going to be transferred from this bowl into the next bowl. We're adding flour on it on top right now because we are going to flip it over, and this part is actually going to be on the bottom. So this is probably the hardest part in making your own bread is not having it fall apart on you. So normally you would flip this into a banneton, which is a bowl that is meant for bread, and it's got little ridges on it and it holds the flour up. So most people don't have one, we don't have one either. So I'm using here a metal bowl and just flouring the bottom a lot. And what it does is it would make it easier to take the bread out after. Slowly put it in, whee! see. Oh, that was perfect. Beautiful. Dust it on top with some flour. So now you're gonna flour it more so on the edges because you wanna make sure it doesn't stick to your metal bowl. What we're going to do next is cover it up with plastic wrap, and then it's gonna go into the fridge overnight for between 12 to 16 hours. There it is in my fridge. See you tomorrow morning. Hi everyone, welcome back to day 2 of baking sourdough bread. My dough has been in the fridge for 16 hours and it's ready to go. I'm super excited to show you the next steps, and today you're gonna get to eat some yummy, delicious bread, so stay tuned. So here I have my Dutch oven that I preheated in my oven at 475 degrees for about 15 to 20 minutes. You want your Dutch oven to be nice and hot. So when you take it out, make sure you wear gloves and you take off the lid and put it to the side. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add my parchment paper to the bottom. And that's to make sure it doesn't stick. So I already have one right here. Put it to the bottom. Be careful, do not touch it because it's super, super hot. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to flour it. Now this is to make sure it doesn't stick to the bottom. Here I'm just using regular flour, but you can also use other things. I've seen other bakers use oats. I've seen them use sesame seeds. I'm just using white flour for now because it's what I have. I'll sprinkle it on the bottom. What you're going to do is you're going to turn the bread so that it goes into the Dutch oven. You want to be really careful you don't burn yourself, but what happens is you want this top part to be facing flat on the bottom. With one hand, pull it like this. I'm gonna use a really sharp knife, and this is the sharpest knife I have. It's not admittedly very sharp right now because we haven't been able to sharpen our knives because we're in quarantine. But what I wanna do is I wanna make some scores in it. So I'm gonna do 3. 1, 2, 3. And the reason why I'm doing this is because I'm telling where I want the heat to go in to the bread. If you have a round pot, you can do like an X, but because I have a longer one, which is actually not ideal for bread, this is how I did it. So now I'm just gonna put the lid back on. Again, I put on my glove because this is hot, and I'm gonna put this back on top, and it's ready to go in the oven. So now that the bread is in the Dutch oven and it's ready to go, I put it in the oven and it's gonna bake at 475 for 30 minutes. Now, once the timer is done, what I'm going to do is turn off the heat and just remove the lid so that the heat will continue to brown the bread. And that's how you get that really nice, you know, like charcoaly, yummy, brown, crusty goodness that you get in bread. And I'm looking forward to showing that to you. So there it is, the Dutch oven with my bread inside. I am going to reach in. Now careful, this is really, really hot, okay? Like you really don't want to burn yourself. Woo, look at that. Okay, now, okay, it still it has to bake. It's not done yet, so I'm gonna put it back in. And it's gonna sit there for another 20 to 30 minutes, and it's gonna get some nice browning. I'll see you later. Whoa, look at that bread. Look at that. Okay, so I'm gonna talk about a couple things that I would have done a little differently. So one thing that I forgot to do before I put the dough into the oven was actually to spray it with water. So if you take a spray bottle and you spray it with water, it makes it a little bit better, which I forgot to do, but oh well. My knife is not really sharp enough. So this is my knife. It's not the sharpest knife. So you see where I tried to score it? I didn't do a very good job of it, and it's also because, you know, my knife wasn't very sharp and I wasn't able to get into the dough as much as I would have liked. The most challenging thing that I can't really get around is I don't have a circular Dutch oven pot. So my Dutch oven is like an oval shape. Get a nice shape if you had a round one, like a perfectly round one, you'd get the nice, give it like nicer height if it were like more narrow on this side. And those are some little tweaks that I would have liked to have changed for this bread, but you know what? It looks pretty good. I can't really complain. I'm pretty happy with it. I hope that this inspires you to try baking bread on your own, but from a side angle right there, that's how tall it is. So anyways, happy baking. Hope you found this helpful. This is what it looks like, and I can't wait to cut into it after a few minutes of letting it rest on the countertop. Thank you so much for watching my video on how to make your own sourdough bread. I hope this gives you some inspiration on something you can do during this quarantine period. If you like this video, please remember to give it a like. Remember to subscribe to my channel and hit turn on notifications. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video.